We've got 13,000 public schools. Every single place where people live in our country, there's a school, there's a story. My name is Rehema Ellis, and I'm the Chief Education Correspondent for NBC News. Today we're going to talk about how to report on education issues. What's been the impact on the children? What would you say to those students who are feeling frustrated by the process? What's the best part about learning how to read? The fact that we have 50 million students in our public schools. It is interesting to see the trends in what's happening in education. Can children read? Can they write? Can they do arithmetic? What about geometry? Do they know anything about history? That's what an education reporter primarily wants to focus on, is how are the kids doing in school? If you haven't learned to read, it is really hard to read to learn. It's important to look at the nation's report card that's put out by the Federal Department of Education. They do a survey every couple of years on our children in elementary school to see how they're progressing in their learning. It will tell you state by state how students are doing. The most recent report card we got on our nation told us that 65% of our fourth graders cannot read at fourth grade level. That's heartbreaking. These kids are not stupid. The adults must be failing them by using programs that fail. For our country, our planet, to continue to progress and be healthy, we need people who have a higher level of understanding about education than just what you're going to get from K through 12. If you're doing an education story, you darn well better show some children. I look for the heart of the story. I look for the micro to tell the macro. I look for individuals to tell us a story that can be representative, if you will, of what's happening in a larger community. You could be one of our producers. Keeping me on my toes, I love it. You gotta get a group of kids. You can't do an education story without children. I don't always talk to parents, but I always talk to kids, and I always talk to teachers.
As long as they're making growth, they're showing you that they're trying. That's really important.
If you're looking for local sources of education, I would look at local newspapers. I think it's so important to go behind the headline. There's a story in every single state in this country. Pick a city. See what they're talking about. It may tell you a story about America, not just a story about one city in one state, but about what's happening all across our country. Here in New York, 80% of the people in jail don't have a high school diploma. That's an education story, but that's also a story about community, that's a story about society, that's a story about law, that's a story about crime, that's also a story about economics. It's so many things folded in to an education story. Education is key to anything that we're going to do in this country. And the people who are without it, they end up in a more dire situation. And those who have the education end up having to support the people who are less educated. And it's just a question of how you frame the story to make everybody realize you have a vested interest in what's happening in our schools in America. One of the things I think that an education beat reporter or correspondent can pay attention to is money. Arne Duncan, who is the Secretary of Education under the Obama administration, said, "Budgets reflect values." So check out what's happening in terms of state government budgets. Many times when they're tight on funds, education gets cut. And when you think about funding in terms of an education story, who's left out? And who makes up the difference? Wealthier neighborhoods. When their education budget is cut, parents in that community, they have fundraisers, they have bake sales, they sell candy, and they make up the difference in the loss of funding. Well, if you live in a poor community where people have fewer resources, it means there aren't going to be opportunities for making up the difference. So if you want an American economy to be strong and to be stronger, it's important for everybody to say education is important. In terms of the top economically developed countries in the world, in K through 12 education, we are not in the top 10. And that should be important to everybody, whether you've got a kid in school or not. That's why I think the education beat is so important, not just for parents, businesses, legislators, governors, presidents, all of us.